Distinguished viewers, there is an old-fashioned word for what happened in Washington, and British Columbia Premier David Eby used it this morning without hesitation. Treason. That is not political hyperbole or partisan exaggeration. That is the legal term for citizens who seek assistance from a foreign power to break up their own country. According to a Financial Times investigation published this week, leaders of the Alberta Prosperity Project, a separatist movement advocating for Alberta's independence from Canada, have met 3 times with United States State Department officials in Washington since April of last year. 3 times. While Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary openly calls Alberta a natural partner for America, while his administration threatens tariffs and annexation rhetoric, Alberta Separatists are sitting in government offices in the American capital discussing how to fracture Canada. And the timing of these revelations could not be more calculated. Today, as Prime Minister Mark Carney gathers Canada's premiers in Ottawa to present a united front. As provincial leaders attempt to show Team Canada solidarity in the face of unprecedented American economic coercion, we learned that some Canadians have been actively collaborating with the very foreign government threatening our sovereignty. Let us be very precise about what the Financial Times reported, because the details reveal the scope of this betrayal. The Alberta Prosperity Project is not some fringe organization operating in basements. This is a group that collected signatures throughout 2025, attempting to trigger a referendum on Alberta's separation from Canada under provincial legislation that Premier Danielle Smith's government made significantly easier to activate. The group's legal counsel, Jeff Rath, confirmed to the Financial Times that they met with State Department officials. 3 meetings since April. Think about that timeline. April through the present, that covers the entire period when Trump's tariff regime was being implemented, when American officials were making increasingly aggressive statements about Canadian sovereignty, when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was publicly declaring Alberta would be a natural partner for the United States based on the province's resource wealth and desire to build pipelines to the West Coast. These were not chance encounters. These were deliberate meetings between a separatist movement and officials of a foreign government that has made no secret of its interest in the weakening Canadian unity. Now consider the broader context that makes this collaboration so dangerous. Trump's administration has deployed a remarkably consistent strategy toward Canada over the past year. Economic pressure through tariffs, rhetorical attacks on Canadian sovereignty, including jokes about Canada becoming the 51st state. Strategic engagement with provincial governments, particularly in the West, that emphasizes their grievances against Ottawa. And now we learn direct meetings with separatist movements. This is not random chaos. This is a coordinated effort to fracture Canadian unity by exploiting regional tensions. David Eby stood in Ottawa this morning and called it exactly what it is. He told reporters before the First Minister's meeting that while he understands the desire to hold a referendum, to discuss issues Canadians want to address, crossing the line into asking a foreign country for assistance in breaking up, Canada deserves an old-fashioned word: treason. Eby was not alone in his condemnation. Ontario Premier Doug Ford called the reported meetings unacceptable and unethical. "We are one country and we should all be sticking together," Ford said, echoing the Team Canada message that premiers have been trying to maintain despite their many internal disagreements. Even New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt, speaking more diplomatically, said she is very optimistic that the majority of Albertans will demonstrate their love for this country and their desire to be a part of it. But notice what is absent from these statements. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has said nothing substantive. Now turn your attention to how Trump's administration has been systematically working to destabilize Canada, because these Alberta meetings represent just one piece of a larger strategy. Start with the economic warfare. Trump imposed tariffs knowing they would hit Canada's industrial heartland hardest. Auto sector jobs in Ontario, forestry in British Columbia, steel and aluminum across multiple provinces. Each tariff was designed not just to extract economic concessions, but to turn Canadian provinces against their federal government. Why is Ottawa not protecting us, premiers would ask, while their industries hemorrhaged jobs? That is exactly the question Trump wanted provincial leaders asking. Then consider the rhetorical campaign. Trump's repeated jokes about Canada becoming America's 51st state were not just his typical bombast. They were carefully calibrated to humiliate Canadian officials while simultaneously planting the idea that Canadian sovereignty is negotiable, that provinces might be better off making their own arrangements with Washington. when Treasury Secretary Besant called Alberta a natural partner for the United States, he was not making an economic observation. He was sending a signal to Alberta Separatists that America would welcome their province if they chose to leave Canada. Now we have confirmation through the Financial Times reporting that this was not just rhetoric. American officials were actively meeting with Canadian separatists throughout this period. 3 meetings that we know about. How many more occurred that have not been reported? What specific discussions took place in those meetings? Did American officials offer financial support? Did they discuss recognition of an independent Alberta? Did they coordinate messaging between the separatist movement and Trump's public statements? The Alberta Prosperity Project has been collecting signatures to force a referendum under legislation that Premier Danielle Smith championed last year. Smith made it significantly easier to trigger such referendums, lowering the threshold for petition signatures and shortening timelines. At the time, she claimed this was about democratic accountability, giving Albertans a more direct say in their governance. But the practical effect has been to empower separatist movements like the Alberta Prosperity Project. And Smith's response to this week's revelations about their Washington meetings has been conspicuously muted. Last week, she issued a statement saying she supports a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. Notice the careful phrasing, strong and sovereign Alberta. That language comes directly from the separatist movement's framing. They argue Alberta needs sovereignty from Ottawa's control, that federal policies on carbon pricing and pipeline approvals represent an assault on Alberta's autonomy. Smith has spent her entire premiership amplifying these grievances while claiming to support Canadian unity. The contradiction becomes impossible to maintain when we learn that separatists are meeting with American officials. David Eby said this morning that he will raise this issue at today's First Minister's meeting. That puts Mark Carney in a delicate position. He needs Alberta's cooperation on national issues, ranging from interprovincial trade barriers to climate policy to the upcoming CUSMA review. Directly attacking Smith over her tolerance of separatist collaboration with American officials risks pushing her further toward the separatist camp. But failing to address it decisively risks emboldening other provinces to consider their own arrangements with Washington. Consider what Carney has been saying about the changed international order. At Davos just over a week ago, he told global leaders to stop pretending the rules-based system still functions. He described the current reality as great power rivalry, where the powerful use economic integration as a weapon of coercion. That was not abstract theory. That was Carney describing exactly what Trump is doing to Canada. Using tariffs and trade threats to force Canadian provinces to choose between their national government and access to American markets. The Alberta Separatist meetings represent the next logical step in that strategy. Trump's administration is not just pressuring Canada economically. They are actively courting separatist movements, offering implicit support for Canada's fracture. This is how empires have historically broken up rival powers. You do not invade, you do not need military force. You simply exploit existing internal divisions, offer support to separatist factions, and watch the country tear itself apart. Mark Carney's response this morning was characteristically measured. The First Minister's meeting will focus on what Canada can control, he told reporters. But what Canada can control depends entirely on whether premiers like Danielle Smith are willing to prioritize national unity over their provincial grievances. Depends on whether Canadians across the country understand that Trump's interest in Alberta has nothing to do with helping Albertans, and everything to do with weakening Canada. Some will argue that the Alberta Separatists have every right to advocate for their cause, that meeting with foreign officials is not inherently treasonous, that this represents legitimate democratic expression. Let me be very clear about why this argument misunderstands both the law and the reality. No one is questioning the right of Albertans to hold a referendum on separation. Quebec has held 2 such referendums. Scotland held one on leaving the United Kingdom. Democratic societies allow their populations to vote on their own governance. What crosses into treasonous territory is seeking assistance from a foreign power to accomplish that separation. When you sit in Washington, meeting with State Department officials from a government that is actively threatening your country's sovereignty, you are not exercising democratic rights. You are collaborating with a foreign power against your own nation. The cruel irony is that Alberta separatists believe they are advancing Alberta's interests by courting American support. They imagine an independent Alberta would thrive by exporting oil directly to American markets without federal interference. But consider what actually happens if Alberta separates. The province becomes landlocked, dependent entirely on American goodwill for market access. Every pipeline, every export, every trade agreement would require American approval. Trump's administration would have complete leverage over Alberta's economy. The same American president who uses tariffs to bully Canada would have total control over an independent Alberta's economic survival. This is not liberation. This is colonial capture dressed up as sovereignty. David Eby was right to use the word treason this morning, not because he enjoys inflammatory rhetoric, but because the word describes precisely what is happening. When citizens of any nation seek foreign assistance to break up their country, particularly when that foreign power has demonstrated hostile intent toward national sovereignty, they cross a line that democracies cannot ignore. Mark Carney faces a test of national leadership today that goes beyond economic policy or trade negotiations. He must unite premiers around the recognition that Canada's strength lies in its unity, that provincial grievances, however legitimate, cannot justify collaboration with foreign powers seeking Canada's dissolution. The alternative is watching Trump's administration systematically peel away Canadian provinces through a combination of economic coercion and separatist collaboration. Alberta today, Saskatchewan tomorrow. Who knows what follows? Canada either stands together or we will certainly hang separately. The choice belongs to us. Canada no longer needs to ask for permission.